Good morning, everybody. Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. And I decided to get rid of the 30-second countdown because there's somebody who commented on a video one day. They were like, it's just really sad how we go from having a little dance party to this weird countdown. I don't like the weird countdown. Try to get rid of the weird countdown, so I did. And I don't remember what the person's name was, but I figured, you know what? Hashtag man of the people. I'm going to do it the right way. So here we are. Welcome in. Now, it is a big day here on the Russ Joy Show. Why? Because we've hit episode 25. I actually want to know from people. I know this is stupid, and it probably is not really worth the discussion, but I'll bring it up anyway. I did 3 shows last week, or like 3 shows over the last 10 days, and I called them reaction shows, but they were like full-length shows. Do I count them? Like, is this actually episode 28, or should it only be episode 25? It doesn't really matter, but for some reason, it bothered me last night when I was like making the thumbnail for the episode. I was like, is this what I think it is? Is this really episode 25? Where are we at? Anyway, it's a great day on this show because we're going to get into what happened over the weekend with the Eagles. We're going to get into what happened over the weekend with the Flyers. We're going to get into what happened, unfortunately, last night with Paul George in a very upsetting, potentially problematic injury that Paul George suffered in a preseason game last night. We're going to get there later on in the show. Plus, since it's a Tuesday, I've decided we're going to open it up to all of you. If there's anything else that you want to get to that we don't get to at some point or isn't part of that rundown, by all means, you can send it my way, and I'll be happy to bring it up here on the show. We can have a little chitty chat, have a little discussion, engage in a little bit of fun stuff here on a Tuesday. So I'm going to go out really quick to the comments. We're going to go do the shout outs out to the people who are joining over on YouTube, X, Facebook, wherever they get this show. And a big shout out to all of you wonderful people who also listen in the podcast feed. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel because as we've brought up here a few times, we are currently in the midst of the drive to 500 subscribers. It's a thing. It is still actively happening. So by all means, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go out, you subscribe to the show. It's going to be like, listen, somebody is going to win a jersey worth up to $175. Yeah, actually, before I go out to the comments, let's make sure that we take it back. For those of you who might be unaware of what's going on with this drive to 500 subscribers, it's a very, very simple process. I want to build the YouTube channel. I've been able to put enough work into building 2 other YouTube channels, the Snow the Goalie one, which we started from scratch, and the It's Just Wrestling show, which I'm actually going to do an episode of It's Just Wrestling this week. If you're a pro wrestling fan, you should go subscribe there. That's like featured on the YouTube channel farther down and everything. I think it's also in the description of the episode. But I built like 2 other channels to over 3,000 subscribers, or contributed, I guess. I should say contributed because it's a 3-man team with Snow the Goalie, but realistically do a lot of the building there. But built 2 channels, and I'm like, all right, well, let's build the Russ Joy Show. So I'm doing a giveaway, jersey of your choice. 1 random subscriber to the YouTube channel is going to get the jersey of their choice. There are a few different ways that you could enter, but I'll pull this up here. I tweeted this out, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So as part of the drive to 500 subscribers, I'll randomly select a subscriber who'll get the jersey of their choice up to $175. If you want to enter through good old-fashioned Twitter, X, you can go over there, retweet it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're just watching on YouTube, you don't have to go over to Twitter and retweet it. You can just simply subscribe. If you're listening in the podcast feed, you can simply just go over to YouTube and hit subscribe. I will tell you that I think you're supposed to make your subscriptions public, at least for a little bit, so I can actually see your name and add it to the drawing. If you have everything set to private, I might not be able to pull your account. I'll give everybody a heads up because it's going to be within 7 days of hitting 500 subscribers. That's when we're going to select the random viewer, random listener of the show. So you don't have to make them public yet. I'll give everybody a heads up and say, hey, we're going to do the drawing on whatever date, 7 days from hitting 500. Make your subscriptions public for, I don't know, like the day. I'll make sure I have all 500 plus subscribers. And I'll throw it into like a randomizer. I'll maybe even make that part of a show. We'll do a randomizer on screen. And then you can know that it's not rigged. It's not a rigged contest. So anyway, that's something that we're looking forward to. The channel continues to grow. Very happy about that. Very appreciative to all of you who actively go out and promote the show and, put it out through your social media. I do appreciate it. I just saw Ford hit it with a quote tweet. Good man, Ford. Good man. But if you haven't done so already, make sure you go subscribe. It looks like CT Landry just reposted it as well over on Twitter. So thanks to you guys and thanks to all of you. Now I'm going to go out to the comments. Now that I've already throttled some of the early momentum on the show by, trying to promote a jersey giveaway. By the way, the 175 is because of the Flyers. If I had my druthers, it was going to be like $130, maybe like $125. But then I looked at how much it would be to get a Matvei Michkov jersey, and like 175 was the cheapest that you can get that wasn't a women's cut or a kid's cut. So 175 it is.
Russ, if I win the contest and I decide that I want to get a Carson Wentz jersey and a Carter Hart jersey and a Markelle Fultz jersey, and they total 175, is that okay?
I guess. I'd really prefer if you didn't get a Carter Hart jersey, though, just, because of some basic things and allegations. I'd rather not help support that. Anyway, you get it. All right. Out to the comments we go. Nico says, what up? Andrew Fawcett, man of the people, already shouting out Nico. Andrew Fawcett also says, win or lose, Sirianni is a clown. We're going to get there. Philly fan, I told you we would run the ball. Overreaction, Russ. Oh, yeah. Don't worry. We're going to get into it because since Monday's Crossing broadcast, we've learned more. We've gotten a little bit more context on why Nick Sirianni decided to yell at Eagles fans after a very narrow 4-point win over the hapless Cleveland Browns. But we'll get there in a little bit. Andrew Fawcett also says every episode counts. So Andrew is very much in the mentality that we should count the 3 reaction shows. And this should be episode 28, not episode 25. I almost agree with that. I just keep thinking about what happens if you do an emergency podcast on a Wednesday? What if something happens? Is that its own episode? And with Snow the goalie, it is. But with this, maybe it should be. Perhaps it should be. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but it kind of does because then it's 28 episodes in instead of 25. So are we really celebrating the 25th episode today? We're a quarter of a way to 100. I don't know. That means just we're that much closer to 50. All right. Anyway. Chris Freed over on YouTube says Philly sports teams are sinking faster than Kamala's polling numbers this October. My gosh, we have a plan. By the way, we yesterday I got a text from some family, and they're like, "Oh, Trump's going to be in Oaks, which is close to me." Ford knows this. Ford lives close to me. Ford takes every opportunity to tell me that he lives close by, and Ford also tells John Marks every time he gets the chance that John Marks lives close by to him. But Trump was in Oaks yesterday, and I started laughing because I was like, oh, you know what? What if, I don't want to go to a rally. You have to understand, this is an apolitical podcast. I don't particularly like or care about either of these candidates. I don't need people to start to bombard me with it's the end of democracy or it's the end of your right to have a gun or whatever. I'm not doing this. We're not doing this today. But I was like, oh, you know what? It would be kind of funny, though. Show up to a Trump rally, wear a suit. I don't have a MAGA hat. I'm not going to buy a MAGA hat. I really don't want to shave my face, but I was like, what if I went, I just stood outside and I did a Trump thing the whole time. And what if somebody saw it and they were like, wow, that's actually pretty good. And then they passed it along and they're like, oh, why don't you go and meet the guy? Now, listen, you have to understand, if I had the chance to meet Trump or if I had the chance to meet Harris, I would meet them. I would shake their hand. I'd wish them the best of luck because ultimately one of them is going to win. Unless something really crazy happens, one of them's going to win. And you get to say, hey, I met somebody who ran for president. It's an apolitical podcast. Do I particularly care about either of these people winning? Not really. No, I don't. But I did think about it. I was like, oh, that would be something. Oh, we're here at Oaks, and Oaks are a great kind of tree. They're very strong. They're very strong trees, and they are much stronger than Kamala's policies. Believe me. They could have just done that. You could riff. It doesn't matter. There's also somebody, superfan Eric, who's over on the Snow the Goalie channel and sometimes comes on as a concerned fan. He likes to tag me now. I forget the name of the guy who does a really good Trump impression, but he wants me to go head to head with this guy, which isn't going to happen. But for some reason, they just, it's a thing. Anyway, Andrew Fawcett with a shout out for the Buc-ee's sweatshirt. Can I tell you guys really quick? That's my show. Who gives a shit? I can do it. All right, hold on. There was something that happened on the way back from Vegas. I'm drinking out of the Vegas mug, by the way. I'll show you. Show you here on the Zoom, a little Vegas mug. This is my new thing. Every time I go somewhere for work now, I get the Starbucks mug at the local Starbucks. And my wife is like sick of it because we have way too many mugs in this house, but I guess this is going to be my collection thing. I'll get an occasional bobblehead and get a mug. I'm a child with a caffeine addiction. It's fine. It's no big deal. So I'm walking through the Vegas airport and two things happen. One thing that happens is actually really cool. I'm walking to my terminal or to the gate or whatever. And I see this guy in a polo shirt approaching me, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, aren't you that guy who hosts that hockey show or who hosts that podcast?" And I said, "Oh, which one?" He goes, that hockey podcast, Snow the Goalie." I was like, "Yes, that is in fact me." And he's like, "Oh man, I just downloaded the new episode with Briere and Jones and Hilferty. Like, I'm going to go listen to it." And so that was listener Vince. I'm pretty sure it was Vince. It might have been Vinny, but we're going to go with Vince. And I already tweeted out that it was Vince. But I'm like in Vegas at the airport. I don't even know if this guy was on my flight or not. But this guy came up to me. I don't know. Maybe he recognized the Buc-ee's hoodie. Maybe it was the mustache. I don't know. But that was pretty cool. That was like a fun little moment out in the wild with somebody going like, "Hey, I support your show," which is really cool. And I appreciate that. Now, I didn't expect that guy to be like, "I love the Russ Joy Show. It is my favorite show in the whole history of humanity." I would expect it to be Snow the Goalie. And it is funny because whenever Ant and Bundy are out in the wild and people walk up to them, Ant typically gets, "Oh, do you still write for the Delco Times?" Bundy has been like flabbergasted now for like going on 3 years that when people see him now, they're not like, "Oh, Bundy, I love how you used to play. I love all the things that you did as a Flyers defenseman." They're now just nonstop like, "Yo, I love Snow the Goalie." Go figure. Anyway, Snow the Goalie will be back later this week. And we have the Press Row Show on Saturday. Press Row Show is coming back. We have some pretty cool stuff that we're working on and some new segments for the show. And the studio has been built. We're like 13 minutes into this episode. We've talked no sports. It's all been life updates, but it's okay. We have like the studio has been built in Wells Fargo Center. We're going to be doing the weekly Snow the Goalie show in that studio. And I'm actively trying to convince them to let us do pregame somewhere other than where we set up for pregame last year by the Oregon. I'm fine being up there for the intermissions and I'm fine being up there for postgame, but there's a place that I really desperately want to do the pregame show. And I think somebody is finally listening to me over at the Flyers. And I'm like, this would be the best place to do a pregame show. And if it happens, I'm going to be thrilled. While all this thing is going on, I'm going to close out the app that keeps pinging me with a million notifications. It won't come through my ear, but they come through the big speakers. It doesn't matter. Anyway, this is all a big aside. Let's go back to the comments really quick, and then we're going to get into the actual program today. Nico says, "Fly, Flyers, fly." And that it's a little bit chilly this morning. Andrew Fawcett says it's in the 90s. That actually was, by the way, that was jarring to go from 70-ish, 60-ish degrees here out to Vegas for a few days last week for work. And it was like touching 100 every day. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. We actually do have to have, I'm so sorry that the show is off the rails already. I have to tell you about how I almost died. Can we have that moment? Is it okay? Let me know in the comments if it's okay if I tell you how I almost died. Because almost died might be slightly exaggerated, but I'm pretty sure that there was a non-zero chance I almost died last week. I'm just gonna hit you with it. So I don't know how many of you fly. Okay, now you can't fly yourself. I don't know how many of you actually fly or fly a lot for work or fly a little bit, fly occasionally. And I don't mean to feed into anybody's real phobias or anxieties, but I'm gonna tell you about something that happened at the Vegas airport last week that legitimately scared the bejesus out of me. So I'm sitting on this flight, and we were supposed to take off at 3:00. And it's getting close to 3. And the captain says, we're trying to get the most updated readings, or maybe it's almost 3. We're trying to wait until the hour to get the most updated readings on the air and this and that and this other stuff, and decide if we can bring a few more people with us. And I'm like, I just want to go. We all want to fly out. Most of the people that were sitting around me had been to different conferences. There was a gas station conference. When I flew into Vegas, I sat next to a guy who's a writer, which was interesting, writes a bunch of novels. I have to email him. But he also sells gas stations. That's his thing. I don't know how you sell gas station, but he does. So there's a gas station conference out there. which actually kind of tied into the Buc-ee's thing. There was a guy who saw my Buc-ee's hoodie on the way out and was like, I hate Buc-ee's. And I was like, well, you're a terrorist, I guess. I don't know. Like, why? How do you hate Buc-ee's? And then he proceeded to tell me how Wawa was fantastic. The food was great. And there was a lady standing between us. And she's like, I used to work for a company that supplied food to Wawa. It is certainly not great quality, or it's certainly not as great as you're making it out to be. And then it became this whole big thing. It was kind of like it was really like a triple threat match for an undisclosed title belt. But this guy hated Buc-ee's. I couldn't understand it. I think he just might actually belong on a no-fly list now. I don't know. I don't make the rules. Anyway, we get on the plane. And it's all these people who are at all these different conferences. We all just want to go home. We've been there for 3 days, 4 days. The lady next to me had been on the road for 3 weeks. She had the Vegas conference. She had another one in like Atlantic City and one in like Tennessee or something. She hadn't been home in 3 weeks. She just wanted to get home. So the pilot's like, oh no, it's totally fine. Like we're going to fly out. Everything's going to be hunky dory. I only use that phrase on this show. He's like, it's going to be fine. We're just deciding if we can bring more people. Okay, fine. So 3:00 hits. And he goes, all right, we've gotten bad news. And I don't like bad news. Nobody likes bad news at an airport. And he says, the air is really hot air, not as good as cool air for lift. We're going to need people to volunteer to get off the plane. I have never in my life been on a flight where they've said the air is too hot. We need people to get off the plane. This will sound entitled. When I was little, we would fly to the Caribbean. My mom and I. My dad hated flying. My mom would save up all year. I promise it wasn't like some luxurious thing, right? It's cheaper often to go to the Caribbean than to like rent a beach house on the Jersey Shore, whatever. So I've gone to the Caribbean all these times. That has never happened. My wife and I went to Houston in August where it was unbelievably hot. This did not happen. They're like, we need 18 people to volunteer to get off the plane. The shock that swept over the plane was staggering. Everybody's like, what do you mean 18 people? And then they're like, well, in exchange for getting off the plane, you'll get a $1,500 voucher. And now they didn't mention blackouts. And I swear, I actually looked this up before I left about like what happens if they cancel your flight. Do they offer incentives, blah, blah, blah. And apparently there are blackout dates and all kinds of stuff. All right, fine. But they're like $1,500 travel voucher. 15 people. I shit you not. 15 people leapt to their feet like it was the most remarkable giveaway they've ever seen. 15 people were just like, absolutely, I will get off this plane. So 15 people go. Obviously, nobody's counting. It's just the pilot and crew are counting. The rest of us are just like, well, hopefully that was 18. We'd like to get going. Then we find out, no, it was only 15. 2 more people decide to get up. Now, before they did, they said, we need these volunteers. We're happy to offer this incentive, but at some point we might have to start like taking people off based on like when they booked or whatever level they booked at. So then the panic sets in. These 2 people go. We have 1 person that we still need. Nobody else is getting up. Everybody just wants to leave. At this point, we're like 35 minutes into a delay. And we're like, somebody please. So the guy in front of me and one over, he's like, all right, I'll go. The whole back of the plane erupts with applause. I mean, this guy was being treated like a hero who's returned from war. Actually nicer because people don't tend to actually meet people who go and make the ultimate sacrifice with cheers. So this guy actually got better than a hero's welcome, but everybody starts applauding for him. Now, he did have a strong mustache, and I appreciated that. As part of the mustache crew, this is growing back in, but as part of the mustache crew, I support this guy. So we all are cheering for him, and one guy goes, you were just waiting for the applause, weren't you? So he leaves. Well, I panic, right? Because I'm just a normal human being. And I'm like, well, why do 18 people have to get off the plane? Obviously, it's a lift thing, but like, how dangerous was this going to be? Are we all going to die? So I, like a responsible human being, flag down a flight attendant and I say, hey, how often does this happen? And she says, you should have seen the summer. We had to get 40 to 50 people off the flight. 40 to 50 people off the flight. And then she kind of jokingly said, no, you got to clear the mountain. So then, of course, the entire time that we're going up in the air, I can't see anything. I'm in the back of the plane. Everybody kept their shades closed. I'm like, well, I guess at least if we run into the mountain, I won't know. It'll be a quick death. I'll just, like, that's it. Anyway, 40 to 50 people. So then I'm sitting there going, okay, they needed 18 people to get off the flight at $1,500. That's $27,000 worth of potential vouchers if these people actually use them down the line. $27,000 on that one flight alone that airline is going to lose. And then you go, okay, well, what about 50 people at 15,000 or 15 people at 1,500? $75,000. You wonder why flights are so expensive. No wonder. They're trying to make that money back up. It was insane. I don't know if you've ever had that before, but that happened to me, and it honestly drove me absolutely crazy. I was legitimately worried and scared, and it's fine. I survived. We're all great. Everything's great. No big deal. All right, back out to the comments, and then I swear we're going to get into Philly sports talk today. This has been my life now since last week, since we last spoke, since last we spoke on this show. Jamie checks in, says definitely chilly here. Good morning. A special shout out to Jamie, who sent over some videos from, I think, game 1 of the NLDS from her section, proving that the Mets fans did not show up in massive numbers. Jamie's a big Phillies fan. I'm sure it's not very easy right now to have to watch the Mets and the Dodgers. I didn't really watch much at all. So there's that. Andrew Fawcett asks, if he wins the jersey, can he get one that says redacted on the back? You could buy the Carter Hart jersey and then stitch on redacted. No issue there. Let's see. Maury Muse over on X says, any update on the Paul George injury? I thought this was a sports show. Shaking my head. Maury Muse, you wonderful person. Yes, there is an update. There was an update from last night. There was an update this morning, and we're going to get to that in the show. So there you go. Shane Gillis does a great Trump. He's also a Pennsylvania guy. This is JD Reds. Okay. All right, now we're going to keep going. There are some more things, and it's great, and I appreciate everybody. But let's get into some of the sports today. Andrew Fawcett, by the way, says, were you flying Spirit? No, I was flying American Airlines, and this is an actual thing. I've never heard of this before. Ford says, why do they book the seats and the tickets if they ultimately need to do this? I think their hope, obviously, is the airline is they want to have all those people fly out and buy those tickets, but there's just no way to know what's going on. And now I actually did see this, by the way. This is an update on Maury Muse. Maury Muse is out of here. Maury Muse doesn't get the update on Paul George. Sorry about you, Maury Muse. God bless. If you don't believe in God, tree bless. Go find a tree. Give it a big hug. Okay. We are now 22 minutes into the show, and we finally get to sports. This is the show. If you haven't found this show before, typically we get right into the sports, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes we go off the rails. Sometimes the end of the show goes off the rails. Sometimes it's the beginning. It's a big update. We got a lot of things going on. There's some crazy shit that happened this weekend. And I don't actually know where to begin when it comes to the Eagles game, because it was a mostly uninspiring game. I've used the term listless to describe the Eagles and their effort and how they looked in the game. And then I talked about this on Monday on Crossing Broadcast. Really, the big story coming out of the game was Nick Sirianni. And it wasn't because Nick Sirianni coached an incredible game. It's not because Nick Sirianni came out post-game and touted that hey, you know what, I might have had a little bit too much to do with the offensive game plan in the first few weeks of the season. I've fully given that over to Kellen Moore. It wasn't, hey, Vic Fangio did a great job getting this defense to keep a team under 20 points again. No, it wasn't that. It was that Nick Sirianni decided that he was going to somehow make everything about himself. Now, some people thought that it was an overreaction for the media to focus in on Nick Sirianni after this game. But I simply just point out the fact that, no, I don't think it was an overreaction. I think that Nick Sirianni made a really stupid decision. I think that Nick Sirianni ultimately did something that he should not have done, which was jaw at Philadelphia Eagles fans. Now, you might wonder to yourself, why the hell would a coach go after his own fan base? Well, there's been a little bit of added context out there from somebody who claims that they were sitting in the same section that Sirianni was yelling at. But the reason that people were so upset with it, and the reason that people like me said, hey, Sirianni can't do this, is because it overshadowed what was ultimately an unimpressive win. Now, I'm going to show those of you who might have missed it. I assume at this point, none of you have missed it, but we're going to do this anyway, just for the sake of, doing the right thing. I want to show you the actual incident itself. We'll add the context. We'll add the post-game quotes, how some of the national media approached it. But I just want you all to see this if you haven't already. So this is after the game, right? Minute left. The Eagles are taking a knee, end the game, 20-16 win. This is what Nick Sirianni does after the game. He goes up. Hear you. He's yelling. He's yelling something else. He's got the hands. And then kind of like, hands go up over the head, and that's it. So this is what Nick Sirianni decided to do at the end of a game. Now, technically, the game's not over. Obviously, you hope that nothing's going to go wrong. There's not going to be an injury. There's not going to be somehow a broken play on a kneel. But, like, he's not paying attention with a minute left because he turns around and he decides that he's going to start to jaw at fans. All right, so let's go to context, okay? This is like some new context that was brought to the forefront last night. I saw Eagles Nation put it out, so we're going to give them the shout out this morning for compiling all of this. It looks like it was a social media post. So we're going to go over, let's get a little bit of context from somebody who claims that they were in that section and who claims that they might have been part of why Nick Sirianni was so mad. So this, again, is from over at Eagles Nation over on X. So the fans who Sirianni was yelling at after the Eagles win posted their side of the story and context on Reddit. So we can actually pull up the Reddit post here from the Eagles subreddit. I was hoping to get around to this sooner, but it just did not happen. I'm the fan who Sirianni's yelling at the end of the game was directed to. I'm hoping to provide some context because it was actually awesome. Oh, it was actually awesome. Ja. Okay, let's hear about it. There I was in section 138, row 2, seat 4. We don't need that specificity, fella. Okay. First play of the game was a 5-yard run by Barkley. 2nd and 5, incomplete pass. 3rd and 5, incomplete pass. 4th and 5, punt. During the Browns' next drive, there was a TV timeout due to injury. It was during this time that I voiced my concerns to Kellen and Nick. I began to yell, if your star running back gets 5 yards on first down, you give it to him again. Run the ball. Run the ball. I had more to say, but you get the point. Nick turned around and gestured for me to calm down and said something to the effect of, we will, don't worry, I'm on it. Fast forward to the end of the game, Nick came over to the area and began yelling, I told you we would run, I told you. Admittedly, this is paraphrasing because I had indulged quite a bit at this point. The point is that it was not unwarranted, nor did I see it as aggressive. Rather, I saw it as him making a point to let me know that he followed through. I wish I could have provided the context elsewhere too, but I felt like this was at least a good place to start. Even though we did not handle the Browns the way that we should have, we won. More importantly, to me at least, Jalen did not turn the ball over. Go Birds. So that's what this guy said on Reddit. Okay, and then I guess posted this picture. I don't know if he, I don't know why he blurred himself and this other person out. I don't know if that was him. I don't know where that came from, but okay. So that was the context. That at least is the context that this guy shared. Is that this wasn't an aggressive Nick Sirianni being a dickhead to the fans. Rather, it was him following up on something from earlier in the game. Here's why it doesn't matter, okay? Because the optics are what matter. Sure, that's a wonderful little tidbit of information to put out. Except I don't know. Let me see if I could double check when this guy posted this to Reddit. We don't actually have a timestamp. This says 3 hours ago. And I think the 3 hours ago is as of Eagles Nation posting this. This was 7:29 yesterday. So you figure around 4:30 p.m., give or take, on Monday afternoon, this person posts this, right? So that's 24 hours after the game ended. This fan went and tried to take some of the heat off of Nick Sirianni and give his side of the story. That's far too long if you're actually trying to deflect the heat. But again, by the time the game was over, the final whistle had blown, this already spread like wildfire. And yes, it is true that the truth ultimately is what matters the most. But the optics of Nick Sirianni going and doing that were horrendous. They were so horrendous, in fact, that you had multiple national media pundits who then ran with it and essentially said that Sirianni looked like an idiot. And we're going to go first to Damian Woody, who didn't just say that Sirianni looked like an idiot. He said he looked like a clown and brought up something else that Sirianni did after the game. Let's go to him.
D. Wood, what'd you think of that?
What's this clown behavior, bro? This dude is a clown. Seriously, you gonna seriously talk trash to the fans?
Your own fans.
Your own fans. Listen, people come out here and pay big money to come out and watch you put a product out on the field. when you don't perform well, they have every right to boo you.
Damn right.
And you're going to get in all in your feelings because fans are booing you because your team stinks? Like, bro, come on. And then you brought up in our meet, like, oh, then you're going to bring your kids into the post game to kind of soften the blow from what reporters might ask you. This dude is a straight clown, bro. Like, I just don't have any respect for what this man is doing. Y'all barely beat the god-awful Cleveland Browns, and then you want to talk trash to the fans. Get the hell out of here.
So that to me was pretty much spot on with every group text that I was in after the game. That, like, it was a weird decision to go after the fans. And the secondary part of it is actually what Woody said after that, which is Sirianni brought his kids out alongside him for the post-game press conference, which there's nothing wrong inherently with being a coach who decides that, like, I want my kids to be part of this. I love my kids. I want them to experience things. The problem is that when you're the head coach of a football team, you're a head coach of any team, this is typically something that you get to do when your team has had a momentous occasion. You won the Super Bowl. You won the NBA Finals. Maybe you won the NFC. You won the National League. You won the Eastern Conference. Not we just beat the Cleveland Browns at home by 4 points. We narrowly defeated a team that has a quarterback with the worst contract in the history of the entire league, if not all of major North American sports. This doesn't align with that, taking your kids and having them sit. So then there became this like sidebar conversation about like, hey, is it actually fair to attack Nick Sirianni for bringing his kids out? Like, let him do it. Why would that change your job as a member of the media? I said this yesterday, and I kind of marinated on it a little bit, but like, it's sort of simple. If there's your interactions with a coach or with a player, right, as a member of the media, are from the perspective of being a member of the media and a coach or a GM and a player. That's the relationship, right? Now, if you choose as a member of the media to be a beat reporter or somebody who's in the locker room, you might get to know some of the players or maybe the coach a little bit better. You get to know them a little bit more on a personal level. Maybe your kids go to the same school. Maybe you share a common interest. Maybe you overhear a couple of guys talking about a game or about a show in the locker room, and you kind of connect over that. There are elements to like getting to know the person a little bit better because it gives you better context for what you're writing. Like if you know that a guy just welcomed a baby into the world, their wife had a really hard childbirth and like they're 2 months into being parents and the guy's exhausted. It's not something you're going to report because it's not something that the public deserves to know about. And in a sense, they've divulged that to you. So like you might go a little bit easier on them in your writing because you know that there's an extenuating circumstance beyond just like this guy played like shit and that's it. It's like, well, this guy hasn't really slept. His wife's got the baby blues. The baby's not sleeping, all this. Like you have the context, but the fans don't. Okay. So to some extent, when you make that personal connection, all of a sudden, you're not just assessing the person on the player level or on the coach level. You're kind of assessing them on the human level. And so maybe it does change the way that you cover the team or the way that you ask a question. Okay. Let's say that you have not had that kind of personal connection. You've kept it strictly professional. You're covering a player or a coach. You go to ask them a question at a press conference. That relationship is upheld because you are still approaching it from the professional manner. When a coach decides they're going to bring their kids out and have their kids sitting next to them, you are now forced into a scenario where you either have to continue to ask the hard-hitting question that you wanted to, or now all of a sudden you're confronted with the humanity of that person, that this guy is a dad, these are little kids, and all of a sudden the entire context changes. You might even have this in your own life. There's a possibility that at some point you've had a boss that you haven't particularly liked, and you're like, I need to have it out with this boss, or I want to ask for a promotion, or I want to ask for this, I want to ask for that. And then their families with them or their spouses with them. You're going to change the way that you talk to that person. It is just human nature to do that. So Sirianni brought his kids out. I'm sorry. This to me was very much because he knew the kind of heat he was getting immediately. Nick Sirianni strikes me as a very online guy. Okay. So I assume that Nick Sirianni was like, you know what? I'm getting roasted right now. I'm going to bring the kids out, deflect some of the heat. And then he was asked about what he did after the game. And Sirianni's quote that was kind of going around was that he was just happy to get the win. He was just happy to get the win. And then Sirianni went into the locker room after the game. And I want you to hear what he had to say about that win, that 4-point win that culminated in him going out and yelling at fans or to fans, depending on how you want to approach the context that we provided earlier. This is what Nick Sirianni said after the game to his players after a 4-point win over the lifeless Cleveland Browns.
Good desire, good effort, good everything. Way to have that dog mentality. Unbelievable job, right? Guys, I know, and I told you this about why I talk about my family a lot and why I kind of correlate the two. I know in my core, I know deep down that connection, accountability, details, and toughness wins. And makes good men too, right? I know in my core, guys, I'm raising my family on it. I know. Keep plugging away. Hungry and humble. Hungry and humble. Hungry and humble. It's about everyone.
It's about everyone. Oh, there we go. Hungry and humble. Let me just ask a very, very quick question, a very, very brief question, if I may. So Nick Sirianni goes out of his way to say hungry and humble. I want everybody to just take a moment here and remind me, do we think that what Nick Sirianni did running off the field, do we think that the Nick Sirianni who did this, let's bring up Nick Sirianni's actions here on the screen. We'll put this on loop because I'm just curious. When Nick Sirianni says hungry and humble, does this, my friends, does this look hungry and humble to you? Is this what hungry and humble looks like? Is this consistent with hungry and humble? When Nick Sirianni talks to his team, that I have contended for a little bit here, maybe longer, has a culture problem, has an accountability problem. When the coach goes into the locker room after the game and says, like, excellent effort, which it was not, excellent job, which it was not, and then says hungry and humble, but there's this film, there's this moment, there's this clip that overshadowed the entire win. Does that look hungry and humble to you? Because it doesn't to me. Now, I'm not a pearl-clutching, capital J journalist who's like super old school. But I'm sorry, that's Bush League. Like, if my kid's soccer coach like came over to the sideline after a game, I was like, I told you we weren't going to run tiki-taka. I told you we were going to bomb balls in, long balls over the top and let your son run onto the ball. I'd be like, what the hell, dude? Like, what are we doing? If I went to go see a high school football game, the high school football coach turned around and started yelling at the fans, I'd be like, what the hell is this? And this guy's like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Now, I know there were some people who thought that it was a total overreaction and that Sirianni didn't deserve all of the hate that he got and all of the negativity that came his way. And Rex Ryan also went on Get Up yesterday, and he had his own moment where he said that you have to connect with the fan base. Well, okay, so if we overreacted, let's just say hypothetically that I overreacted along with a lot of other people in the media and with a lot of other people who care about the Eagles, who cover the Eagles, or who watch the Eagles. Explain this to me. Why did Nick Sirianni feel the need about 24 hours later to go out and apologize? Because if you missed it, on Monday afternoon, Nick Sirianni apologized for looking like an unmitigated douchebag. Let's just roll this really quick. I want everybody to hear what Nick Sirianni had to say, and we're going to run this in full. It's about a minute and a half. Let's hear what CM Punk at last year's All In had to say. A little reference for you wrestling fans out there. Yes. All right, here we go. He really does kind of look like Mark Farzetta. He looks like Farzetta a little bit.
Mr. Laurie and I talk every time after the game. Every time I haven't talked to him yet today. I know how supportive Mr. Laurie has been through everything. I would say this about that. You know, what I was really doing, I was trying to bring energy yesterday, energy, enthusiasm yesterday, and I'm sorry and disappointed on how my energy was directed at the end of the game. And my energy should be all in on coaching, motivating, right, and celebrating with our guys. And so, that's and I got to have better wisdom and discernment of when to use that energy, and that wasn't the time. And so, we have the best fans in the world. There's no place like this, and they show up and show out no matter where they are, where we are. I can't, Brazil, Arizona, it doesn't matter. New Orleans, and in that game too, that they had two. It was loud, and I thought it was really loud, energetic, and those two false starts that the Browns got that forced a field goal instead of that. Who knows? Like they're they're 4th and 8, excuse me, at the 8-yard line, and then they get a penalty and they don't go for it on 4th and 13. Who knows how that goes? And so our fans brought the energy, brought the passion, brought the juice, and like I said, yeah, that's my answer to that.
And that's all I got to say about that. So to recap, Sirianni claims that he hadn't talked to Jeffrey Lurie that day. Methinks that someone from ownership or the front office may have approached Nicholas of House Sirianni and said, "Hey, dickbag, that was a bad look. It's all anyone's talking about. You better go out and own it." Now, Sirianni does kind of look like a guy who's like being interrogated in that moment. The shaved head, very bold choice. It really does look like a hostage video. It does. Now, Nick Sirianni, we could say on a human level, appears to not be a bad human being. I know that I've been very critical here. There have been some names said, some words exchanged one-sidedly on my end. I don't think Nick Sirianni's a bad guy. I think he's a bad coach. I think that it was a mistake to bring him back. I've been consistent about that. I think it's a mistake that he got to finish out last year. I think it was a mistake that they kept him through this offseason with other options available. Belichick, Vrabel. I think that this has actually set the franchise back potentially 2 years, because if this team is going to look as bad as they did yesterday against an easy schedule for the rest of the year, yes, they may make the playoffs, but it's not going to be a deep run, because a lot of the issues that have permeated this team continue to be at the surface. I actually made the comparison on Monday. I should have clipped it, but I compared Nick Sirianni's tenure as head coach to like a bad piece of meat, right? Because the meat can still look okay on the outside. You're looking at this package that you bought at Costco and you're like, oh, I had this one top round. I was going to turn it into jerky, and the color on the outside still looks okay. It's 4 or 5 days past, and you smell it and you're like, well, what does raw meat smell like anyway? And so you kind of sell yourself on the idea that like, this is going to be okay. You start slicing it. Color on the inside's a little bit wonky, maybe a little bit darker, right? This is just the oxidation. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to marinate it. I'll put it in a marinade, and then it'll be fine. It'll tenderize. It'll make the smell better. So the next day, you've had it sitting in the marinade in the bag overnight, and you take a whiff, and you're like, all right, it smells better. We're going to call the marinade Kellen Moore. And then we're going to go put it on the big green egg, and the big chunk charcoal is going to be the Fangio, and that smoke is going to permeate the meat, and it's going to taste better. But what ultimately is going to happen is you're going to find out pretty soon after eating that meat that it was past its expiration, and like you're going to get diarrhea. You're going to get the runs, kind of like the run that the Eagles went on at the end of last season. It was all downhill. And then eventually you're going to feel a little bit better, and then you're like, maybe it was something else that I ate. And so you take a little break, you go and maybe eat some rice, or you kind of chill, you take some Pepto, and then you come back to that meat again and you eat some more of it. And like your belly's kind of okay, and the Pepto's in there. So like maybe it's kind of holding things together a little bit better than it should. And that's kind of like the first few games this season. You have a cramp, you get through it. But what's about to happen is the Eagles decided that they're going to eat more of that Sirianni spoiled meat. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to understand that the food was bad. The meat was bad. And then you're left with a real confusing scenario. Now you're left with some marinade that hopefully you didn't use all of. You still have some marinade that's supposed to be good. That's your Kellamore marinade. And you still have some big hunk charcoal Fangio that you think is still good. And you want to be able to use them, but you need a new piece of meat. You need a new coach. Then you have to make the decision, do I just throw out the charcoal and the marinade and start from scratch, which is what they probably, to some extent, should have done last year, right? Or are they going to go out and like try to find another coach to come in and be hamstrung with like, I have to use this marinade and this charcoal? Or are you going to throw it all out and now you need to make a new marinade and a new charcoal and a new piece of meat? Like, I don't know. The Eagles, by virtue of bringing back Nick Sirianni, have run themselves into a potential no-win scenario. To me, there's no way to salvage this, okay? And again, their talent alone, especially on the offensive side of the ball, might be able to win them enough games to make the playoffs. It might. Jordan Mailata potentially being out for a while is not good. Like, that actually could be season-altering. All right. And I saw somebody throw out the idea of signing 42-year-old Jason Peters. If it happens, I'll puke. I seriously will puke if the Eagles bring back Jason Peters. We all know Jason Peters gets on the field and almost immediately comes off hobbled. And this is just how it works. Great guy, by all accounts, Hall of Famer. But like, that act got real old real fast for me in Philly. Mailata being out could hurt. Darius Slay being out will not hurt. Because I think what we actually saw on Sunday is Quinyon Mitchell still has very good instincts, very good selection. Looks like he's adapted very well to the NFL. CJGJ bangs into him. Otherwise, Quinyon Mitchell would have had his first interception of his career. Cooper DeJean looked really solid at in the slot. That's an encouraging sign. If Slay's out, I don't think it's a backbreaker. I think Mailata being out could really hurt. I'm going to go over to some of the comments, though. I feel like at this point, I've talked to the Sirianni thing into the ground. And I'm honestly sick of talking about Nick Sirianni. So let's go over here to the comments. Sean C says, nearly 48 hours on this, now a non-issue. Nobody cared about his antics 2 years ago. So this is part of being fickle as a Philly sports fan. People liked the passion of Sirianni when the team was winning. But ever since the team has started to lose, you have to adjust. And no, we don't want to see this. We don't want to see Nick Sirianni yelling at fans after the game. Go out and have a decisive win. You win 42-17 on Sunday, by all means. Jaw jack all you want. That's fine. And then come out immediately in the press conference after. Here's what Nick Sirianni could have done. I actually don't know why he didn't do this. So he had his kids on his lap and in front of him and flanking him. Sirianni could have very easily answered the question about like why he was yelling at fans like this. I wasn't yelling at that fan. That fan early in the game told me we needed to run the ball. I said we were going to run the ball. We ran the ball. We won the game. And I turned around and I was kind of playfully, maybe it looked angry, but I was playfully going back and saying, see, I told you we were going to run the ball. And guess what? When that happens, it doesn't become national news. It doesn't lead segments on Get Up. It doesn't become fodder for national pundits. It doesn't become fodder for Damian Woody and for Rex Ryan. It doesn't become like something that like a Colin Cowherd talks about. We just go, oh, okay. Like, that's fine. Maybe some people take issue with it, but like, it's very easy. It's that simple to give a little bit of context, which is why it's not that I don't believe that Reddit post, but it's like, if you're Sirianni, you have a very easy way to diffuse it. And you clearly knew that it was an issue. Again, I think he's a very online guy. Okay. Oh my God, this is good. Ford says, Vincent D'Onofrio, who was on Law and Order CI. He actually looked like a friend of mine that I had grown up like his dad. Full Metal Jacket. Compare it to Sirianni. That's pretty damn good. Pretty spot on. Andrew Fawcett says that Sirianni's losing it. Hopefully he's unemployed at the end of the season. Sean C says Greg Berhalter taking selfies and signing autographs a few years ago, 10 minutes to go in a match was 100 times worse than this. Well, sure it was. I mean, we could say that Greg Berhalter doing the thing where they were scoreboard watching and he was telling the U.S. players the score of the other game when they were getting set up for a set piece that they conceded a goal on. That was also very bad. CT Landry over on X says, Coach needs to pay attention to his team and what's happening on the field, not to Section 138. I agree with that. Ford says, the kid thing bothers me the most. It's a shield. And Andrew Fawcett agrees, says that the kids have no place in the press conference whatsoever. Chris Freed checks in over on YouTube, says both the Phillies daycare and Nikki's press conference daycare are big time busts. JH takes takes exception to Sirianni saying that it was an unbelievable job. Andrew Fawcett also not happy with it. You beat a terrible team by 4, and that's the response. Kevin Godfrey over on YouTube says, finally caught the live feed. Kevin, thank you. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Drive to 500 subscribers. Get yourself entered in to win. Michael Sirkin. I don't remember Michael Sirkin being on the feed before. Michael Sirkin, don't forget to hit subscribe. Thanks for finding the show. Sirianni is a joke. It's the same story every year. Time to move on and find someone else. Let's see. Sean C. says, Joe Burrow will tear this defense apart in the air. Daniels on the ground. I'll tell you what, though. Burrow and the Bengals have had arguably the most disappointing start to a season that we have seen in recent memory. And I know that they've gotten off to some really slow starts. But, man, the Bengals have just not looked very good. I think that there are more questions that should be getting asked of Burrow, but that's just me. Andrew Fawcett asks, are there too many egos in the locker room? I keep coming back to this idea of like culture being a problem, that there is an issue with the Eagles team. I don't know if it's an ego thing. I don't know why it seems like things like the idea of like the inmates running the asylum maybe is going a little bit too far. But like there are definitely moments where I've been like, this just doesn't seem like a team that's led by a veteran coach. And in fairness, Sirianni's not really a veteran coach. I don't like the consistent, like the constant comparing him to Belichick because it's like a very different standard. But like, do we think that? Oh God, I'm gonna say, like, does Mike McCarthy have these same kind of like culture issues with the Cowboys? Oh, that felt gross to ask. Would a Bill Parcells have this issue? Would a Joe Gibbs have this issue? Belichick would not have this issue. This almost reminds me of like Josh McDaniels, like a Josh McDaniels coach team. That's a problem. This reminds me of like Lane Kiffin in the pros. That's not good. Not good at all. Ford checks in and says, Sirianni won't get any good jobs after this, probably ever. He has a job with the Eagles, Super Bowl winning franchise. Once he's canned, he will be. He probably winds up coaching at the U of Johansson. I don't think so. Listen, the NFL is a place where they continue to give mediocre coaches chance after chance after chance. If Sirianni gets laid off here, he'll find another job in the league. It might be as a coordinator for a little bit, but he'll probably resurface. Doug Peterson could get fired in Jacksonville, and that was after he got fired here. Now, he won a Super Bowl, so there is a distinct difference there. But no, I think Sirianni would end up finding another game. Jamie says, as someone who watched the Bengals-Ravens game from start to finish, yes, Burrow will. The pass defense is toast. I guess we shall see. And Jamie also says that the Reddit guy called into WIP this morning. Interesting. Very interesting. Let's see. Ford's trying to give me pronunciation tips on Italian. Not a good idea, Ford. And then CT Landry kind of reinforcing. He went to a Super Bowl. He'll get another opportunity. Okay. I'm done right now with the Sirianni thing. Here's what I'll say about the Eagles win. If there's a big positive to take away, it's that the Eagles defense once again held an opponent to under 20 points. They did so in a pretty impressive fashion. I never got the feeling on Sunday that the Eagles defense was going to break. I didn't. And if you think about it, 7 of the points that were put up by the Browns came on a blocked field goal after a sack that was taken by the quarterback on a play call that made no sense. So 7 of those points were special teams right before the end of the first half that took the teams in tied at halftime. That was Rodney McLeod Jr., who we all love and appreciate here in Philadelphia. But Rodney McLeod recovers the blocked field goal, runs it back to the house for a touchdown. So it wasn't even like the Eagles defense gave up the 16 points because they didn't. That's a positive, especially against a bad team, especially against a team that has again, this quarterback who has the worst contract in the history of the league in Deshaun Watson. So, like, there's a positive. Defense did an okay job. Again, bend, don't break. Totally fine. They were okay. Jalen Hurts looked significantly better. Is it because he had A.J. Brown? Yeah, like that doesn't hurt. Having A.J. Brown back, having a healthy Devontae Smith back, that's certainly going to help a lot. Now, were there moments in that game where you say questionable play calling? We showed this on Crossing Broadcast on Monday, but like the targets and receptions, that route tree that A.J. Brown put together, it was a lot of go routes on the left and some dig routes on the right. But there were like no routes across the middle that ended up with a target at all or ended up with a reception of any meaningful gain. There have been a lot of questions going around about whether or not Kellen Moore's offense is actually what we're seeing here, or if it's Nick Sirianni's offense with a little bit of Kellen Moore's motion, pre-snap motion, just based on what some of the bigger X's and O's guys who cover the sport and put their stuff out on social media, based on what they've been looking at and how they've been assessing it, they have said very clearly, this does not look like Kellen Moore's offense. This looks like Nick Sirianni's offense with a little bit of Kellen Moore influence. That to me is not great. That is far from ideal. If you're an Eagles fan, that should be alarming to you. But Jalen Hurts had a better game, looked more accurate, didn't turn the ball over. There was that deep ball on a go route to A.J. Brown down the left side of the field where he caught it. He kind of slowed down his route and he caught it like on his hip, where you're like, wow, it's a great throw. It's maybe even better, an even better adjustment by A.J. Brown. It just shows you the value that that guy has and the kind of talent that that guy brings to the table, which is why I got so infuriated over the summer when there were like, people who were not actively trying to like put a wedge between A.J. Brown and the fans, but it was like, what are we doing here? The guy's an incredible talent. Legitimate. Like A.J. Brown is probably the best wide receiver they've had since T.O. And if A.J. Brown weren't here and it was just Devontae Smith, you could probably make the case that Devontae Smith is the best wide receiver that the Eagles have had since T.O. It just so happens that you kind of have this embarrassment of riches that you have both of these guys who on any other team would be the guaranteed number one, probably in the case of A.J. Brown, and very likely the number one receiver in Devontae Smith. The Eagles are very lucky that they have both of these guys and they have them both under contract for the considerable future, which is great. So there are positives to take away from Sunday, but we have to be really, 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 really careful because you can't look at that win and say that everything is peaches and cream. It's not. I still have legitimate concerns about how much of a say Nick Sirianni has over the offense right now. And if the idea here was bring the head coach back, give him 2 new coordinators, and then Sirianni's going to override them, which did come out post-game, that he overrode a Kellen Moore play call and he overrode Vic Fangio on a defensive play call and it didn't work. That to me is a concern. I know that head coaches are supposed to be the guy that ultimately like gets to make the final call and that they're the one that is getting paid the biggest money of any of the coaches and they're supposed to like be the one that you can trust. But just based on how last year went, based on the fact that you gave him 2 new coordinators, I'd much rather see them have full autonomy. And if they fail, they fail. And then you just make it very clear that they're the ones who failed. All right, call me crazy. Now I'm done with the Eagles for now. I want to get to some of the other stuff. Let's get the negative out of the way. Let's get the sad bit of news out of the way before we end on a positive note. So I was getting ready last night as I was putting together the episode and the thumbnail and everything. I was like, oh, we're going to talk about Paul George, at least for a little bit, because Paul George looked good in his preseason debut, put up over 20 points, looked like a dynamic scorer, multiple levels, looked everything like what Tobias Harris wasn't, right? Looked like a guy who could absolutely be the number 1 option on nights where Joel Embiid isn't available, could look like the number 2 or even the number 3, but like the most competent number 3 scorer on a team in the entire league. But then last night, Paul George got hurt. And I'm going to throw this up here now. It's not a graphic video of his injury, but it's going to show you the injury that he sustained in last night's preseason game. And if you take a look at his left knee, this is where there is a legitimate concern. There it is, right there. We're going to do a little slow motion. Oh, wait. I can adjust the playback speed. Heck yeah, buddy. Here we go. So you're going to see Paul George's knee right in here. He steps back and bow. That's not ideal. Now, I'm pretty sure that we all know this at this point, but your knee is not supposed to do that where it almost looks like it's coming out the wrong side of your leg. So you can actually see where it kind of boop right there. Boop. Yeah, it's not good. That's not good. It's not ideal. If you're a Sixers fan, the good news that you got last night and was kind of confirmed again this morning is that the team views it as a hyperextension, and that Paul George said after the game he's not concerned with it. So there's a positive for you. That's like one positive that you can take away from this Paul George injury is that as of right now, neither he nor the team are concerned. It didn't sound like they had any fear that he tore his ACL or his MCL or his PCL or his LCL. It sounds like as of right now, they think it's just a hyperextension. I expect them to shut him down for a bit. I think he's going to be fine. Let's see. It was Gina Mizell, who is the Sixers beat reporter for the Inquirer. I didn't know that, but she is. She said, let's see, that Paul George claims that he is disappointed that he could lose very valuable preseason time with his new team, but he stressed that he's not too concerned with his knee injury. So that's a little bit of good news that you could take away from it. And apparently he had a sleeve on his knee, but that was it. There was nothing else more severe, nothing more serious. It just looked like a painful injury, hyperextension of the knee. And you obviously hope that he's going to be okay. And it seems like as of now, there have been no new reports about Paul George or about the severity of the knee injury. So we assume that he is okay. And we send our best because obviously Paul George is a massive part of what the Sixers are trying to do this year. It will be absolutely critical to their chances of doing anything this year to have him available. Now, all of that happens, right? And then I'm like, okay, we're feeling a little bit of positivity around the Philadelphia 76ers because Paul George is going to be okay. And then I see that Joel Embiid put out a quote where he's talking about back-to-backs. And I'm like, oh boy. Oh boy. So apparently, Joel Embiid came out and said that he doesn't expect to ever play back-to-backs again for the rest of his entire career. Okay, so let's put the words up here on the screen so everybody can see them and can digest them together. Not like that rotten Sirianni meat. Here we go. Embiid doesn't plan to play in back-to-backs for the rest of his career. He says, if I had to guess, I can do a really good Joel Embiid voice, but I'm not going to because apparently you can get canceled for that, even if it's accurate. So, okay, I won't do it. If I had to guess, I'd probably never play back-to-backs the rest of my career. That hurts. And then we got this Shams report. I don't think we talked about it on this show, but Shams obviously replaced Woj. We kind of figured that was going to happen. There was that brief moment where it was like, oh, Jeff Passan could be, or Passan. I always confuse how to say his name. That he might be the guy and he might switch sports. But here was what Shams had to say about this new normal for Joel Embiid not playing back-to-backs.
Turn to some other injury news. This one out of the Eastern Conference. Joel Embiid, he's been ruled out the remainder of the postseason as he continues to manage that knee. What is Embiid and the Sixers' mindset for the preseason, going into the regular season?
What we're seeing with Joel Embiid, it's part of the new normal that we're going to see with Joel Embiid. I'm told it's going to include periodic time offs for him during the course of the season. It's going to include regular scheduled checkups for Joel Embiid throughout the course of the season. I'm told he is not worried. He is not concerned about any accolades this season. He's not concerned about the 65-game limit for the All-NBA team or MVP. He only wants to be 100% healthy for when he has not been. And that's the playoffs. And to get him there in full born and full shape, that is the ultimate concern. And what's on the mind of Joel Embiid and the Sixers, from his shape, from his weight, from his conditioning, they want to make sure he's all systems go when the playoffs start. And this is going to be a part of the new normal we see with Joel Embiid.
So I know that for some of you, that's a real disappointment. And I see JH over on YouTube saying that doesn't fill me with anything resembling confidence. Let me just say this. We all know that the Sixers could be a really good regular season team. We know that Joel Embiid has been a very good regular season player. He's won an MVP award. He's been in contention for multiple MVPs. He finally got that individual accolade. None of the regular season really matters. And I've now said since the end of last season, and I will continue to say the same thing, you will not see the Sixers competing for the top seed in the Eastern Conference, barring significant injury to Boston, right? You're not going to see the Sixers competing for the top seed in the East. I firmly believe that you'll see the Sixers somewhere in the number 3 to number 4 range, and they're going to be content with that because they're going to load manage the hell out of Joel Embiid, especially now that he's got this buy-in where he's not looking for the individual awards. He's not worried about all NBA or about the All-Star team. He'll still get voted into the All-Star team. Let's be real. But like load managing Joel Embiid is absolutely critical. Load managing to some extent Paul George is going to be important. But the regular season doesn't matter. You want to finish in the top 4, right? Like you don't want to have it where like you fall to the 8th seed, and now all of a sudden you have to do the play-in, and then you have to play Boston in the first round. You don't want that. But as long as they finish somewhere in the top 4, they're going to be fine. They'll be okay. And as the team is currently constructed, they are very much built to be a playoff team. And Andre Drummond, I saw the quote going around yesterday, once again reaffirmed that the reason he came back to Philadelphia is because Joel Embiid pretty much begged and pleaded with him that he needs him and that he's not going to play every game and that Drummond's going to have some opportunities to start. And like, they just really liked playing together, which is funny because when they first came into the league together, when Embiid did, they had this real nasty rivalry, trolling each other on social media, especially, I mean, Joel absolutely trolled Andre Drummond on social. But that's been a relationship that has been built up, has been fostered, has been cultivated, and Embiid got Drummond to come back. They don't need Joel Embiid to play 70 games this year. They might not even need him to play 65. 60 probably gets it done. Joel Embiid will virtually dominate any other center in the league. They'll pick up enough wins with him in the lineup. Conceptually, they should be able to hand the reins to Tyrese Maxey and Paul George for those other 20 games and pick up enough wins in those that you end up with a top 3, top 4 record. And then you let the chips fall where they may in the postseason. Now, the question that you have to ask, and the one that is fair to ask, is, all right, what if you load manage Joel Embiid, and then like the week before the playoffs, as he's kind of ramping up, he gets hurt, and it was all for naught? Well, then it's a totally different scenario. Then you have a legitimate problem on your hands. What happens if you load manage Joel Embiid, but you're too conservative, and then he goes into the playoffs and he has rust? He doesn't look like a guy who's fully healthy because his cardio's not there. Well, we know how that plays out. We've seen it many post seasons that Joel Embiid doesn't look like he's in the best shape or that he's healthy. I get the idea of hedging. I get the idea of trying to make sure you're setting him up for the best success you can, because ultimately his success is the Sixers' success. Paul George, if he can be healthy, is really the thing that will determine if they get beyond the second round this year. If they go into the playoffs with a healthy Joel Embiid and a healthy Paul George and obviously a healthy Tyrese Maxey, I don't think there's any team in the league that can stop the Sixers except for the Celtics. That is it. Legitimately, that is it. And you have to hope that Paul George can be the determining factor in what gets you past your all-time nemesis here in Boston. I don't think there's a team in the Western Conference that lines up particularly well with the Sixers. Maybe that. I mean, Dallas could present some problems. Do I think Dallas is going to get back to the finals this year? No. Not as currently constructed. I don't see it right now. Now, am I being a little bit too bullish on the Sixers because I like the Sixers? Maybe. I think top 3, top 4. I'm going to go over to the comments quick, and then we're going to finish up here talking about your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers, who actually had a good weekend and got very encouraging signs out of 2 of their young players. JH says, if a Flyers player tried this, he'd be run out of town. Okay. Different expectations, different sports, entirely different player empowerment movements for each sport. I don't know if you can make a direct parallel. I think if any Philly player on any other team tried to do this, it'd be the same thing. I think Bryce Harper could have gotten away with this because of the wrist and the elbow injuries. if Bryce Harper had shut it down for 3 weeks with the hope of being healthy for the playoffs, fans would have given him a pass. If the it's so hard to even envision a scenario where the Flyers are competitive or are a cup contender. But like, let's say like Couturier fell apart down the stretch last year. If the Flyers somehow work themselves into playoff position and like they're a top 4 team in the East, which no, but if that were to happen and Sean Couturier were being load managed where he's not playing the second half of a back-to-back and he's still training with the team, still ramping up, but the idea is to like put less miles on that body so that he can be healthy for a playoff run. Couturier might be able to get away with it. Might. There's no one else on that team that could. Eagles. Do we have an Eagles player who'd be allowed to shut it down? I mean, like in theory, if the Eagles finish with a good enough record, they will sit all their starters in the final game. But that's just part of the culture of the NFL. If the Philadelphia never mind. We're not going there. Not going there. Chris Freed. Give a shout to the Sixers. That was a masterclass on a news dump on the Embiid knee injury right during the Eagles game on a Sunday afternoon. Respect. I think the news actually came out on Saturday, but I could be wrong, where Nick Nurse said that Embiid wouldn't play at all in the preseason and that he had a knee scope or knee procedure, knee checkup or whatever, but it was already scheduled and no reason to panic. Yeah. Sean C says Sixers could sit him for the regular season and he'd still end up tearing his meniscus by game 2 of round 1. You might not be wrong. HC says there's no team that can beat the Sixers besides the Sixers. Yeah, I mean, I really do think that Boston's it. New York, by the way, the Knicks, I love the fact that Philly and New York are in the midst of like reigniting rivalries. I love it. Do I love the fact that New York has now ended Philadelphia's season in basketball and baseball in the same calendar year? No, I don't love that at all. Do I love the fact that the Rangers are miles ahead of the Flyers right now? No, I don't. Do I love that the Eagles are miles ahead of the Giants? Yes, I do. I somehow gone into Bernie Sanders. We're going to do one of these. Every Philadelphia team deserves to have a win. There is a part of me, though, that loves the idea of these citywide rivalries. The Union still hate Red Bull. No matter where the teams are in the standings, that is a legitimate hatred rivalry. I like Philly and New York having a rivalry that can extend into the postseason. I would obviously much rather see the Philly teams come out on the winning side. I'm not afraid of the Knicks. By the way, if you didn't see it, Dante DiVincenzo went at Jalen Brunson's dad in a preseason game the other day. And DiVincenzo, when he was standing at the free throw line, appeared to yell at Tom Thibodeau, but it might have been at Brunson's dad, who's like an assistant coach. Something like that's what happens when they let you make the decisions, like talking about the trade. There had been like reports after the trade that DiVincenzo didn't want a reduced role. I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like the guy is actually kind of pissed that he doesn't get to play with the rest of like the Nova Knicks. But no, I'm not worried about the Knicks. Karl Anthony Towns doesn't scare me because Karl Anthony Towns, although he would theoretically have the ability to compete with Joel Embiid on the interior, he won't do it. He just won't. And I think that the Knicks lost a hard-nosed player who actually could have out-hustled the Sixers and given them real trouble in a series in Julius Randle. I'm not that concerned about the Knicks. Maybe I should be, but as of right now, I'm not. We'll see what it looks like when it's, 30 games into the season. Maybe I'll reassess. But as of right now, like they're going to be a good team. Be a good regular season team. They might be a good playoff team. I still think that a healthy Sixers team beats them. Let's get into the final thing on today's docket, which is the Philadelphia Flyers. Some of you people may enjoy the Philadelphia Flyers. Let's have a very quick conversation about how the team did over the weekend. They did a wild thing in their season opener. The first goal of the season was scored on the power play. Now, for those of you who decided to suffer through the Flyers season last year with myself and with Ant and with Bundy and checked in on the Press Row Show and checked in on Snow the Goalie, and you kept wondering to yourself why you enjoyed putting yourself through that much pain, you would know that the Flyers' power play was historically bad last year. It was one of the worst plays in the entire history of the National Hockey League. And yet, the first goal the Flyers scored this season was on the power play. That game ends up going to a shootout. And in that shootout, Morgan Frost, of all people, who was banished to the Chateau Bow Wow multiple times by John Tortorella last year, nets the winner in the shootout. It was incredible. What a great first win. And in that game, Jet Lashenko looked like a legitimate player, looked like a legitimate NHL player, which will now start to get people's thoughts going of, could the Flyers potentially keep Lashenko here for more than 9 games? That is where the first year of the ELC would trigger. Now, I could tell you definitively that the Flyers front office does not want Jet Lashenko to stay at the NHL level this season. They think that for his development, it will be better for him to get a look here and then go back to juniors and dominate there. And then maybe next year have a legitimate run up and a chance to make the roster out of camp. Now, he made the roster technically out of camp this year, but they would rather wait a year on him. And they also don't view themselves as a Stanley Cup contender this year. And so why burn a year of his ELC just for the sake of having him here? The coaching staff, and especially John Tortorella, want Lashenko here, thinks that he earned his way onto the team and that they are a better team this year with him on the roster. And Tortorella is probably right. There's a good chance that he's right. The only problem, once again, is that burning a year of the ELC on a non-competitive team or a team that, like, maybe will somehow work themselves into being a bubble playoff team, even though it's not good for the long-term trajectory of trying to build a cup contender, there might be a power struggle here at some point between the front office and the coaching staff. Ultimately, the front office gets to decide. And if they say Lashenko goes back down to juniors, that's where he goes. But I fully expect to see him factor into a number of games. I would expect him to play in the home opener on Saturday. Now, he didn't play in the second game. The Flyers ultimately lose the second game. It was not because Lashenko wasn't in the lineup. I wouldn't even put the game really on Ivan Fedotov. There were just a few things that were working against the Flyers against Calgary. I wouldn't look at that as a huge setback. And again, if you went into the season expecting the Flyers to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender, I got news for you. That ain't it. Now, I'm going to go over to some of the comments here really quick, because there are some fine folks who cared about the Flyers and wanted to make their voices heard over on YouTube. JH said, "Stop the count. The power play is cured." That is not accurate at all, but it was an encouraging sign. Sean C. says, "McDavid, 0 goals to start the season. They just got walloped at home by the rival Flames after getting walloped by the Blackhawks. Tonight's game might become background noise by 11:15. Woof. Woof. Dersh says, one word, Fedotov. Fedotov. I like that. That's actually pretty good. JH says, Eris on and Fedotov. That's pretty good. It's pretty good as well. Listen, the Flyers this week, they have a hell of a gamut. They are in the midst of a 4-game road trip out west to start their season. To pick up a win in the first 2 games, not bad. Pick up a win, have a loss. It's okay. Getting the shootout win is huge. Now, the Flyers play the Oilers tonight, Tuesday night. So another West Coast game. It's another 10 o'clock puck drop. We will be monitoring that game. Then they go out to Seattle on Thursday night. We'll see how that one plays out. And then they're home on Saturday, the home opener, Saturday night at 7 o'clock down at Wells Fargo Center, hosting the Vancouver Canucks. And I will tell you that that will be, obviously, the first episode of the Press Row Show. If you are a Flyers fan and you somehow to this point have not found Snow the Goalie yet, we do the Press Row Show every Flyers home game. We're located up on the balcony level. That's all the way at the top. We're right outside of the Snow the Goalie Sportsbook, right next to the organ player. Section 121, there's glass doors. There's 2 private elevators. You tell them you're going up to the sportsbook. When you get off the elevator, we're right there. We do the Press Row Show for pregame, intermissions, and postgame. So if you haven't already subscribed to the Snow the Goalie channel on YouTube, or if you get your podcast, make sure you do that. That's going to be a lot of fun this weekend. I look forward to getting back down there and all the hilarity that will ensue with doing a show again with Ant and Bundy. And we're actively making it a point to make sure that we do a weekly Snow the Goalie. Last year, we got so overwhelmed by all of the home games and by trying to do the morning after show from away games that like we stopped doing the regular Snow the Goalie show. Well, now that the studio's been built down at Wells Fargo Center, we fully expect that we're going to be doing actual shows, and they're going to look and sound better because it's in that little studio. And I will also point out to the people that like the show doesn't change if we do that with the nicer cameras and the studio setup, because our contract, our partnership with the team doesn't change. We have final say. We have our creative control over our show. If the Flyers play like dog shit, guess what? I go on the show and I say, the Flyers played like dog shit. I can say that on Snow the Goalie. I can't say it, I believe, on Press Row Show because they treat it like we have to follow the same rules with the Press Row Show as they do with pre and post game live on the radio and TV. I think it's nonsensical. I think we should be able to be uncensored. They disagree. But on, I could say they played like dog poop. They played like dog crap. Okay. An important question here from Andrew Fawcett. Did we upgrade the potato can? Yes and no. We actually have somebody now from the Flyers organization who we talked to, who has something to do with video production, who was like, guys, like, why didn't you have us helping you last year? And we said, I don't know. No one ever communicated that we could. So now we're working with somebody who's hopefully going to make things look and maybe even sound a little bit better. So I'm looking forward to that. That's actually going to be a really big plus. Now, will Potato Can be better? I have no idea. My hope is yes. I hope that we're going to have a better way to feed an actual video signal into the stream so that we don't have intern Andrew's potato cam, where as somebody once said, it looked like Ant was eating garlic knots and rubbed his fingers on the camera lens. Is intern Andrew returning? Yes, we got him credentialed. Intern Andrew will be back. So if you've been missing the smooth, dulcet tones of intern Andrew's voice, he will be there as well. CT Landry says, can you say that about Torts? I can say if I think Torts did a dog shit job coaching. Sure, I can say that. Do I expect Torts to show up on our show this year? No. Do I expect Torts to do the grandstanding thing with Ant again? I have no idea. If he does, we're going to have a problem, though. We will. I'll have to have a chitty chat with some people at the Flyers, because at that point, I'm going to have to remind somebody that Torts is an employee of the organization and that somebody has to say something. We'll see if it happens or not. I also hope that if Torts decides to do what he did to Ant last year, if he does it again, I hope Ant will actually stand up for himself / the show, and that Ant maybe will ask Torts something to the effect of, oh, did the Kevin Hayes, Cutter Gauthier thing, is that why Kevin Hayes got traded to Pittsburgh for virtually nothing? Did that follow him to Pittsburgh as well? We'll see if it happens. I have no idea what's going to happen. Chauncey asked that question. Jay Grebby says, need to release intern Andrew's dramatic reading of his holiday poems. We're going to get there. Don't worry. Don't worry. JH says, damn, I loved watching pressers like it was found footage horror film. I don't know. We'll see. We're going to see what happens. Will we get an opening poem from intern Andrew? I don't know. I will have to ping him. Maybe I'll text him later and ask if he's going to have one ready. Jay Grebby thinks that Edmonton's going to come out with their hair on fire tonight against the Flyers. We'll see how that works. HC says we just need to keep Cates on McDavid all night. Let Cates do what he does best and shut down McJesus. And let's see. There's one other thing. Andrew Fawcett says Fedotov looks so small for such a big guy. He's a massive human being. You have to. The one thing that I will just remind people, Ivan Fedotov came over under very difficult circumstances last year. Immediately joined the team, all new equipment, trying to learn the game, trying to learn the North American game. Some Russian goalies, it takes a full year for them to adjust. Some it takes longer. Is there a chance here that at some point Fedotov could go down and Kolosov could come up and you're looking at trying to get both of these guys some reps and some confidence? Maybe. Is there a scenario here where Sam Ersson gets hurt, Kolosov gets the call up, and then you have Kolosov and Fedotov going back and forth, getting some experience in the NHL level? It's entirely possible. Do I think Fedotov is going to light the world on fire to start the season? No. Do I think that if Fedotov gets some regular starts, that by the second half of the season, he's going to look like a much more competent NHL goalie? I do. I will simply remind people that before he got picked up in an unmarked van and sent off to do his year of mandatory military service in Russia, Fedotov was being viewed internally by some with the Flyers as being able to push Carter Hart for playing time. Like, that's how highly some people were actually assessing Fedotov. You're a couple of years removed from that. Obviously, circumstances have certainly changed. But there was a belief that Fedotov could be a legitimate star goalie. Now, I think at his age, you're not actually banking on him to be a number one or to be a star goalie for you. But we'll see how he adjusts throughout the season. We just won't know until we see it. Let's see. Sean C says Kolosov has to get 1 or 2 by the end of this month or he's going back. From what I have gathered, I don't think there's a scenario where Kolosov goes back to Dynamo Minsk. I don't think he's going back to the KHL. I think that at this point, he is going to stay with the Phantoms. And I think a big part of why he's going to stay with the Phantoms is because it has been communicated to him that the goalie position at the NHL level is in flux. They believe that Ersson is going to be the number one and that he will continue to lock himself in as the number one. But I think that it has likely been communicated to Kolosov that that backup spot is anything but a foregone conclusion. Even though they gave a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract to Fedotov, I don't think they're necessarily married to him. I will also point out that Sevragin has been incredible in the KHL. If you haven't looked up Sevragin or any of his stats or any of his highlights, he was so good at he's 19. I think he's 19, 18, 19, one or the other. I think he's 19. Sevragin was playing so well on loan to another KHL team that his parent club already brought him back off of loan and put him in and installed him as their starter. He had like a 941 save percentage. I think he was either a 500 goalie or under 500 goalie, but he had like a 941 save percentage. His numbers were like absolutely absurd. I know that like I'm kind of riffing on it without having them in front of me. I can look it up really quick. But he's been phenomenal in the KHL as such a young goalie. He got the start for SKA. He's 19. He's been incredible. Let's see. As of October 9th, when he got brought back to SKA, he had a 941 save percentage. I think he was sent to Sochi. Yeah, he was on loan to Sochi, which is where Matvei Michkov had been playing. He's been fantastic, legitimately fantastic. We'll see. We're going to monitor him because all of this like goalie drama, Fedotov, Kolosov, all of this, none of it might matter. If Sevragin keeps playing the way that he's played, there's a very big possibility that down the line, Sevragin ends up coming over and he's your number one. And he's your like answer to Shesterkin. By the way, the Shesterkin contract, I don't think there's been any movement on it. But Shesterkin apparently turned down an 8-year, $88 million contract, which obviously is $11 million per year. He turned that down last week. Kevin Weeks reported that. I don't know what he's looking for. There's a part of me that thinks he wants to take like a 3-year deal, hope that the revenue keeps going up in the league and that he'll be able to get like closer to $15 million per year and that he's willing to bet on himself for a few years. But that's a huge contract to turn down, especially if you're a goalie. I don't know if I would have advised him to do that, but good for him. We'll go over here real quick. Mind Munchies YT says Kolosov will get his chance. They'll keep Fedotov for Michkov. Those two hang out all the time. And also notes Snow the Goalie Saturday night, the Press Row Show. Dersh asks, would Fedotov be waived? If so, is he at risk of being claimed? I don't know. I think that that's ultimately like the big question here is what happens if he were to get waived. He might clear waivers and go to the A. I really don't know. There's part of me that thinks like from the geopolitical standpoint of how the Flyers were able to get him out of Russia, that there might be kind of like an acknowledgement from the other teams to like, all right, we're not going to claim this guy. The Flyers like work this thing out, whatever. But he's a huge guy. He's a big goalie who had some pedigree playing for the Russian national team. If you're a team that's hurting for goalie depth, it'd be kind of hard not to go after him. The contract isn't a huge albatross. It's not a super long one. The money itself isn't incredibly high. It might be a risk. I don't know. I really don't know. We'll find out, though. We're going to find out what Fedotov looks like. It's going to take a few weeks, maybe take a couple of months, but we're going to figure out if he's good enough, if he's going to be used as trade bait. That's like a scenario here, by the way, that could play out. Fedotov might play himself into being considered at an NHL level, maybe like a decent enough starter, right? Like he might end up playing well enough that a team decides that they're going to part with actual picks for this guy. And if they do, and if the Flyers are convinced that Kolosov could then move up from the A and be a good backup goalie, it's not a bad scenario. And if they think that in the next couple of years, Zavragan could come over if he continues to play well, like they have a whole pipeline. There's Bjornsson, there's some other guys as well. Bjarnason. There is a path here where the Flyers could potentially trade away some of these goalies and get actual draft capital, which will help to accelerate the rebuild. Now that's it. We've gone very long on this show today, over an hour and a half. If you're on the live stream, if you're in the podcast feed, it's probably going to end up being right at about an hour and a half. I want to thank everybody who checked in over on YouTube, on X, on Facebook. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go over to YouTube, subscribe to the Russ Joy Show. If you're on the Joy Media channel, I love and appreciate you, but head over to the Russ Joy Show channel. Subscribe there. The drive to 500. When we hit 500 subscribers, I will randomly select a viewer. That person will win the jersey of their choice up to $175. I saw occasional commenter AJ Snap over the weekend. He is a big Rangers fan. And he said, how much is it going to hurt you when I win the free jersey and I end up getting a Rangers jersey and you have to pay for it? And I said, you have to win first. Now, I'm not going to rig it against him. Certainly not going to rig it for him. If ultimately this jersey giveaway becomes I have to buy a jersey of a rival team for somebody who's subscribed to this channel, I don't know how I'll feel, but I will be glad that we got to 500 subscribers. So there's that. If you haven't done so already, like the video. That is huge. If you're watching this video or you go back after the fact and you watch it, or if you're listening in the podcast feed and you just feel like being generous today, go over to YouTube, like the video. That's big. Share the video. You can share it on social. You can share it on X, on Facebook, wherever you want to share it. Share it. I don't know what the hell Rumble is. You can share it on Rumble. You want to share it on Truth Social. You can share it there. I don't give a shit. Again, apolitical podcast. You want to share it on Blue Sky or Mastodon, or I don't care. You want to share it into text? Fine. Excuse me. Fine. Share the video. And if you can, if you've been commenting live, I love it and I appreciate it. But if you can, once the video is done, once the stream is over, go into the regular comments and put a comment there. I want to pin the best comments. So it could be something from this episode. It could be something you agreed with, disagreed with it. It could be something ridiculous. I don't care. Go comment as well. That's a big help. If you haven't done so already, you can go over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts, and go over there and leave a 5-star rating. A 5-star review on Apple Podcasts is massively helpful as well. And if you leave a 5-star review for this show, I will go out of my way to make sure that I read the review on the show. And in fact, we do have a 5-star review. So we're going to read a 5-star review. Now, it's over a month old, and I somehow missed it, but here we go. This is from Flyers Fan 1953. September 3rd show is the name of the review. Okay. I was very curious to get your take on the reporting of the passing of the Gaudreau brothers and the senseless tragedy. You hit the topic straight on, and will be interested in the next Know the Goalie to hear Ants and Bundy's takes too. Again, this is like a month ago. I saw Dylan's tweet, Robillard. Was going to pass it on to a friend, but saw no confirmation, so I wanted to wait until the morning to see if any of the official report for Columbus, Calgary, the family, or even trusted NHL insiders came out. Before I got a chance to touch base with my friend, he contacted me with the news. That's a very sad 5-star review by Flyers Fan 1953. If I had seen it, it probably would have made a little bit more sense in context a month ago. But I want to thank Flyers Fan 1953 for leaving a 5-star review. Again, you can do that over on Apple Podcasts. All right, this has been a very long show. I appreciate all of you for joining. I'll be back on Friday morning at 8:30 a.m. with an episode of The Russ Joy Show. And my intention as of right now is to also do an episode of It's Just Wrestling this week to review AEW Wrestle Dream. I still have like 2 matches I need to watch. I'll probably do that over on that channel. The links and everything are in the description of the episode. We obviously have Snow the Goalie coming back this week and the Press Row Show on Saturday. So there's a lot of stuff. I'll be talking into a mic a lot this week, and I appreciate all of your support with any of those shows as well. Thank you to all of you. I will talk to all of you here, at the very least, Friday morning, 8:30 a.m. on The Russ Joy Show. Until then, I've been Russ Joy. This is The Russ Joy Show. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Talk to all of you very soon.